Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey and today we're going to be reading some classics. Because my maternity leave is going so well, I'm having so much fun, I love spending time with my son, I wanted to give myself a little bit of a challenge. This year, one of my really big focuses, I think I've said it in several videos by this point, is to read more classics. I have a lot of classics on my TBR. Last year, I really gave up on them, obviously, pregnancy brain, nothing was going on up here. And now I feel like this resurgence of wanting to read classics, to study them, but to also feel like I'm in school again. So consider this like an episode 1 of me getting back into classics again. And I chose some relatively easy classics to read. I started off with the shortest classic on my TBR, and this is The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. And this follows the death of a man named Ivan Ilyich and how it affects the people around him. Then next, for no particular reason and no commentary on the world and what is going on right now, I decided to read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. I have studied philosophy and sociology before, so I definitely have read excerpts from the Communist Manifesto, but I never read it in totality with commentary. And the commentary is from Tom Butler Bowden, by the way. So I decided, let me just tackle the entire thing and see how I feel about it. And then finally, I decided to go for a reread of a book that I did not really enjoy within my degree, but I feel like if I just sat down and concentrated on it and did not play games during class, that I would really love it. And that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So I will take you back to Kelsey 1 week ago when I started with the death of Ivan Ilyich. I'm sure I have a better introduction to this vlog, but while I look good, I wanted to start it on my end and not put this makeup to waste because I filmed one intro and outro for another vlog, the Yellow Jackets vlog. If you want to look above, or it's on this side, wherever it is. So I am going to start my classics reading vlog, and my goal and my intention is to annotate and be like a little student, analyze it for you guys. I'm so excited for that. And I'm starting with a really easy book because it's like very short. How many pages is this? 113. I wanted to update you at the 100-page mark. Maybe I can just like start with this, settle with it, read it. Maybe if I have really interesting things to like jot down or talk about, I can come talk to you, or maybe I can just use this as like a primer and then come with you at the end of the book and talk about my overall experience with this first before I get into the other books. That might be interesting. First, let's talk about what the hell this book is about, because I literally have no idea. The description at the back is like just questions. Laying humanity bare, these two devastating stories ask, is it, oh, it's 2 stories. Okay, perfect. So I can maybe come after one story. These 2 devastating stories ask, is it possible to have a good death? And what does it mean to truly live? I love that. Hailed as one of the world's supreme masterpieces on the subject of death and dying, The Death of Ivan Ilyich is the story of a worldly careerist, a high court judge who has never given the inevitability of his dying so much as a passing thought. But one day, death announces itself to him, and to his shocked surprise, he is brought face to face with his own mortality. I love this. Like, I'm really into concepts of death and stuff, so I think this could be a really interesting book, actually, to dive into. So I think I'm going to read The Death of Ivan Ilyich first, raw dogging it, because there's no audiobook that follows the exact wording. I've tried like at least 7, and none of them have the exact wording that's used in this Penguin Little Black edition, because it's translated by Anthony Briggs, and none of the ones that I was listening to were translated by him. So we're raw dogging this, baby. Let's go. Hello. So yesterday I went ahead and just read the entirety of The Death of Ivan Ilyich, just because the story itself was only 93 pages, and then the last 20 pages was his short story called 3 Deaths, which I'll say straight off the bat, I didn't really get much out of. I didn't really care about it, but The Death of Ivan Ilyich was a really interesting like examination on a person who did everything they could to live the right life and live life the way that everyone sort of expects you to. And then when he was on his deathbed, he realized, or rather when he was slowly dying, he realized he didn't really live the life he wanted or valued the life that he wanted. And so through looking at it in that lens, you can really see how the beginning portion of the novel, where we're looking at his friends who come to see him, they care more about going back to play a game of cards together, and who are a little bit upset because they have to go visit the widow. But all of that is for propriety, right? You don't want to visit the widow because they're saddened, I guess, by their friend's death. They have to go do it because they have to. And I think that that's really interesting, because at the end, Ivan Ilyich is like, I wish I could just play a game of these cards with my friends, and instead I'm like dying with nothing to show for it, basically. And he's like, I thought if I would have lived the right life, I would be like rewarded in death in a sense. And he realizes that he's just dying like everybody else, you know? And so not knowing what to expect, I was pleasantly surprised by this read. It's at the same time extremely philosophical, right? We're talking about like expectations of life and death, but it's also really accessible. And I don't know what I expected with Russian classics. I guess it's also due to the translation for sure, but this made Russian classics so much less scary to me. So I'm really looking forward to picking up more this year. And while the theme of the novel, which was pretty simplistic and not at all like really revolutionary, I appreciate the way that Tolstoy demonstrated this message, right? Because we have this contrast of Ivan with his friends and Ivan with his wife and his kids, how in the end it's only really his servant that cares for him or cares to take care of him. All the characters within the novella had a part to play, and he did not waste time or sentences on characters who would not like further illustrate his point. It's simple but effective, and I really think this novella is a quick and impactful read, asking its readers to really appreciate life before they die. So I gave this 3 stars just because that theme is really simplistic, but I did really enjoy it. Then last night I only read a couple of pages in the Communist Manifesto. This is by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It is a manifesto written to encapsulate their ideas on communism and introduce communism to the masses, hopefully, they were hoping. And it has an introduction by Tom Butler Bowden, which I'm currently reading right now. And it's discussing like basically who Karl Marx is and the reason that led him to communism and incorporating a more communist philosophy in his life. So some of the things I'm highlighting are obviously because they are starting to become more relevant today, right? So the movement was also about better condition and rights for workers. Few demanded genuine economic equality with the rich. The vast chasm between the rich and the poor could no longer be tolerated. And we're seeing this right now with the extenuating circumstances of late stage capitalism in a sense. Like we see the differences between us and like, let's say the 1%, and it can't be tolerated anymore. They have more money than all of us combined and they could literally solve the world's problems. Elon Musk could give $1 billion to every single person on earth. That's crazy. We even see with like Engels's philosophy, he believed that the socialist revolution could only happen through workers taking over the means of production. It was madness that the producer of goods gained virtually nothing, with all profits going to owners. Now, obviously, a lot of my education is in philosophy, English literature, sociology, so I've studied communism before. I know there are issues with communism. I think with the rise in this late stage capitalism and more socialist communist ideologies coming to the forefront and being more relatable than they've ever been probably in my lifetime. I think the Communist Manifesto is a book that I really do want to read. I read parts of this manifesto obviously through my studies, but this will be the first time I'm reading it from front to back with an interesting introduction into the topic to refresh my mind of the basis of this philosophy. And I think right now I'm not going to continue reading this because I do have to edit my Yellow Jackets vlog and I want to get it published by Thursday. I'm going to edit that while my baby's sleeping. Hopefully I can get quite a bit done. And then I obviously have to start cooking supper. Hello, so I wasn't going to come update you because I wasn't sure if there would be anything to really say on the Communist Manifesto because it's so short, but I did just want to update that I have finished the actual manifesto portion of the book, and it really just dives into the general communist ideology that was also covered in the beginning by Tom Butler Bowden. So if you do have this edition, I really think that Tom Butler Bowden has done a great preface and introduction to the book because his language, the language he uses, makes it far more digestible when you dive into Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx's version of the manifesto. There's a lot of what Tom Butler Bowden said in his introduction that helps me understand the wording and the circles that Karl Marx was getting into when talking about the proletariat and at what point does the proletariat enter the bourgeoisie, right? Because there is obviously this discussion about the middle class and how it sometimes benefits from the bourgeoisie and then from the proletariat as well. And what I really found interesting and probably one of my favorite conversations is when they're talking about the lumpen proletariat. So these are an unthinking mob who can become tools for reactionary and militaristic governments. I'm just saying it's interesting. It becomes obvious to the proletariat that things such as morality, culture, religion, and law are not universal, but rather bourgeois conspiracies to keep the worker and his family in their place. Currently, with some governments in the world, we're really seeing this a lot and how it is coming to an uprising, and it partly is due to the fact that the lumpen proletariat are part of the problem. They are proletariat workers, working class, who believe in this idea that they can become bourgeoisie or the 1%, right? Nothing suspicious there. And then what I also liked is Marx and Engels were talking about the equality of women, which I think is really interesting, and often women aren't considered in a lot of like theoretical documents and stuff. I have a book on my TBR called Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism, and it's essentially, the argument is just that proletariat women under a communist or socialist government would have better sex because they are treated as equal. They are liberated, right, from the bourgeoisie like horse blinds that we sometimes have to stick into in conservative governments, right? I'm starting to read the appendixes. So the first appendix is letters from Engels to Marx in 1847, where they're talking about what they want to add and take out of the Communist Manifesto. Then Appendix B is draft of Communist Confessions of Faith, which is written by Engels, and then we're moving into like the basics in Appendix C of what communism is and whatnot, and then I'll be done this book. I don't think my feelings are going to change, so I will keep my like overall thoughts to the next clip. Hello, me again. So as predicted, I did finish the Communist Manifesto tonight. I'm going to leave this unrated because I just feel like with these ideological philosophical books, we tend to place a rating on something based on how we feel about the ideology. And I'm not saying this as a critique, I think I would do it as well. The ideology or the political movement that we feel passionate about overpowers perhaps the more like implicit, non-biased idea that we would have about the book if we did not have real world examples of this political ideology, if we did not have strong feelings, unbiased feelings, because we experience this or the opposite of this in our everyday lives kind of thing. So I'm going to leave it unrated. My experience with it was very good. I, like I mentioned, studied a lot of philosophy in school. I have a degree in sociology, so communism has come up a lot as a concept, and I have read portions of the Communist Manifesto, but never the full thing in its entirety, along with any sort of introduction or pre-analysis of it before going in. So I really tabbed it because there are some elements of communism that I do agree with. Obviously, Canada is more of a socialist government, still within the means of capitalism, but there is a lot of communism that I think is really interesting in how it affects us today. Most of the discussions were about the proletariat, obviously, and the proletariat were the labor workers at this time that were being overrun by new machinery. And I think what's really interesting is that we could possibly consider the working class right now as a current version of the proletariat, because every day there is this threat of AI and AI taking over our jobs in the means of capital gain for CEOs and billionaires that own companies, right? We're seeing this a lot where AI is running interviews for companies so that they don't have to pay for proper HR and talent acquisitionists. So there's a lot of like elements that AI can be positive, but it is, I think, turning us into like a new genre of proletariat. So this was really interesting to read right now with the current political climate, but also this idea of AI, consumerism, and proletarianism that we may potentially see. Obviously, we don't know the future, but I do think this was very interesting to read right now. In regards to the format, as I mentioned, I really liked the introduction. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels have written a very accessible manifesto, so I think that was really easy to read. The appendices at the end were really just a repetition of what was brought up in the manifesto and in the introduction, so it could feel a bit repetitive. I think if you're struggling to understand maybe more classical writing styles or translations, having this constant repetition of like what the proletariat is, how is it different from socialism, this and that, is potentially very beneficial. So next, I think I'm going to do my reread of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I think this is going to be the last book for this vlog, just because I do want to edit this and get it out in a timely manner, if all goes well and with my ideas. So I have already read Frankenstein before in university. I'm pretty sure I've read this twice, but the last time I read Frankenstein, I don't think I was paying attention enough to it, and I didn't necessarily like it because I was just reading it to have it done for a class discussion. I didn't really take the time to analyze it myself, or for that matter, pay attention in class. Honestly, I'll admit it. I was pretty stoked. Frankenstein, if you don't know, is written by Mary Shelley. It's considered one of the first science fiction horror-y novels. It is a gothic tale that lays bare the dark side of science and the horror within us all. It tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, who plunders graveyards to create a new being from the bodies of the dead, but whose botched creature causes nothing but murder and destruction. Written after a nightmare when its author was only 18, Frankenstein gives birth to the modern science fiction novel. So I have this wonderful edition with some parts on it. I love it. I'm going to start this potentially tomorrow just because my book club is going to talk about Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor on Thursday. So I think tonight I'm going to read maybe like 100 pages or so just to dive into this and get it started. Hello, so I just got a delivery for the last books I bought from my supporting indie authors video. I know I'm always talking about that video, but I'm really proud of it. And in times like these, I think we really need to support independent things because this is a book channel. I just feel like we should be supporting independent bookstores. So I just want to show you, even though this has nothing to do with classics, the final books I got for that video. This is from the bookstore Le Galion, which is a female run and I believe Sapphic run bookstore here in Montreal, located in the Gay Village. So I really wanted to keep that in mind when I was ordering the books from this store. So the first book I got is Page Boy by Elliot Page. One, because I wanted to support obviously a trans author, especially during these times. And two, Elliot Page is also Canadian. So two birds, one stone. The Oscar nominated star who captivated the world with his performance in Juno finally shares his story in his groundbreaking and inspiring memoir about love, family, fame, and stepping into who we truly are with strength, joy, and connection. Full of intimate stories from chasing down secret love affairs to battling body image and struggling with familial strife, Page Boy is a love letter to the power of being seen. I'm very excited for this. I've been really wanting to read it since it first came out, so I'm extremely happy that I was able to purchase it and at a bookstore that I think it makes a difference at. And then the final book that I got, I'm so excited to read this, The Lamb by Lucy Rose. If you just watched my Yellow Jackets vlog, one of the books I'm considering if I do a part 2 to celebrate like season 4 or whatever would be The Lamb. All I know is that this is a cannibal story. So Margot and Mama have lived by the forest ever since Margot can remember. When Margot is not at school, they spend quiet days together in their cottage waiting for strangers to knock on their door. Strays, Mama calls them, people who have strayed too far from the road. Mama loves the strays. She feeds them wine, keeps them warm, then she satisfies her burning appetite by picking apart their bodies. Sounds really up my alley. So if I do decide to read more books like Yellow Jackets, this will be one that I will consider. So those are the two books I got from Le Galion, and now I'm going to film some short form content. I think I'm just going to include the video in this video as well, and then I'm going to go and read, and hopefully my goal is to finish Frankenstein today. So I want to start and finish it all in one day. We'll see. It's already 1 p.m. I'll try to do my best. Hello, so I didn't end up filming this in time for it to be released. I only got my Aardvark book box towards the end of May. It just felt silly to post this closer to the end of May when it was the May box. But I decided to try the Aardvark book box because they have free shipping to Canada, and that's something that's really important to me. I've never bought a book box because of that, because I always had to pay for shipping. This is the first time I'm trying a book box, which is why I was so excited and I wanted to film an unboxing for it. So here's me just opening it, getting the bookmarks and the book card. Title card. I don't know what that's called exactly. The first book I decided to go with was When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. Gorgeous cover. I really like that the aardvark symbol is not too overbearing, and it's not on the spine of the book, so I absolutely love that. I find it makes it look so clean. This is the summary of When the Wolf Comes Home if you want to pause to read. And then that's Nat Cassidy. Hi. And then the next book I selected for the month. So basically you have one pick that is free, I guess, with your membership price. And then each additional book in Canada is $13, which is a steal because most hardcovers are $37.99. So this is Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Huang. Pause to read the summary. And that's our girl. Hey girl. Gorgeous cover, by the way. And that's it for the book box. Bye. Hello, so I just got to part 2 in Frankenstein, page 87, and I wanted to come here and talk about the first portion of the novel. Now, I am 5 months postpartum, so this could be swaying my thoughts, but part 1 really read like a postpartum depression tale. Of course, this book is about the creation of life. In the title itself, it's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. And Prometheus was a titan known for his intelligence and for being a champion of mankind. He is the one to first give mankind fire to help them become intelligent, right? That's the mythos, that Prometheus is the reason that human beings are smart. So obviously he created us in his light, I guess, like God, I don't know. The epigraph that starts off Frankenstein is from Paradise Lost, which is one of my favorite Old English poems. It's the fall of Lucifer from heavens as he rages against God. It says, "Did I request thee, maker, from my clay, to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promise me?" This is basically like, I didn't ask to be born. I literally told my mom that all the time when I was young and she would get mad at me. I was like, well, I didn't ask to be here. So am I Lucifer? So we already have this idea that human beings, intelligent beings, are being created within the story. Who creates life in our modern world? Moms. Is that a bruise? Anyways, moms, that's who. It's obviously about the advancement of science. We especially get that in these letters in the beginning from R. Walton as he is writing to his sister, telling her that his ship has been going to the north and they've found this like random man out in the Arctic, and he's telling them his story. The novel from the get-go starts with the want and advancement of men in science, men in STEM. Good for them. And then we have Victor Frankenstein, who is the man that Walton and his ship pick up in the Arctic. And he begins by telling his story and talking about how he was born. So he sees himself as he sees Frankenstein, a creature, something he wishes to play with, a being he created. These are words that he is using to describe his birth and the way his parents thought of him. And then it's interesting because he uses things like creature, being, but in a more positive light, and not necessarily how he would describe Frankenstein, his monster, basically, which we'll get to. Another interesting aspect about Victor is that everything Victor loves, he owns, or he thinks he owns. He talks about Elizabeth this way. This is his cousin / wife, I think she becomes, and his mother gives Elizabeth to him. She's like, I have a pretty present for my Victor. Tomorrow he shall have it. And when on the morrow she presented Elizabeth to me as her promised gift. He says, Elizabeth as mine to protect, mine to love, mine to cherish. So again, this is, Victor definitely feels like he owns things. This creature he created, he obviously owns as well, but because he can't control it, as we see, he refuses to acknowledge it as something that he wants to interact with. Whereas like Elizabeth, who is docile, subservient, he's like, ah yes, that's mine. We could take it as love in that time, but Mary Shelley is the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, who was a prolific feminist writer of her time. So I just feel like these things are very intentional. Victor starts to talk about how he really got into STEM and that he became obsessed with the principle of life. One of the phenomena which had attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence, I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life. Nay, more, I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon a lifeless matter. So he becomes fascinated with this idea of creating life from dead things or from nothing. Frankenstein's monster comes to life. He says, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. And he basically slams the door in this monster's face and runs away. And he's like, I don't want to acknowledge this guy. This is when I was like, could Frankenstein, the book, be an allegory for postpartum depression? Perhaps Mary Shelley went through something like this, because women, after they give birth, you definitely experience baby blues. They warn you about it. It definitely happens. I had it. It's very normal. The experience of postpartum depression is when baby blues, from what I understand, become more serious and you just do not feel that connection with your child after the like month and a half, 2 months postpartum. When I look down at my son, I cannot imagine thinking anything but love. And I know that many women experience something really sad where they look at their children and they don't feel the same. And it's not because they want to, it's just something that they're experiencing postpartum. To think that I'm reading a book about someone who looks at something they've created and thinks of it as wretched and disgusting, and to know that Mary Shelley as a woman potentially went through this, it makes this story far more engaging to me. And I've mentioned that I gave this 2 stars when I read this a couple of years ago during my degree. Obviously at the time, at 22 years old, I was never thinking of having kids, let alone having one. And now, being 5 months postpartum, I can sort of maybe understand this feeling more, but also how alienated Mary Shelley must have felt, especially if she was one of the women who experienced postpartum depression, maybe being surrounded by people who don't, right? I'm seeing Frankenstein, the novel, in a more interesting light. Then a murder occurs. Victor's brother William is murdered and the dad's like, please come back, we're gonna have the funeral, that sort of thing. And on his way back in the forest to get to the castle, he sees his monster. So he's like, as I said these words, I perceived the gloom of the figure which stole from behind a clump of trees near me. I stood fixed, gazing intently. I could not be mistaken. A flash of lightning, so we always have this flash of lightning, illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me, its gigantic stature, its deformity of its aspect, more hideous than belongs to humanity, instantly informed me that it was the wretched, the filthy demon who I had given life. And he realizes that this creature probably murdered his brother. Victor doesn't want to tell people that he believes it's his monster that he created. I remember also the nervous fever with which I had been seized just at the time that I dated my creation, and which would give an air of delirium to a tale otherwise so utterly improbable. I well knew that if any other had communicated such a relation to me, I should have looked upon it as the ravings of insanity. And I think this is a direct commentary on the fact that women are too often not believed when they express how they are feeling, especially I can imagine during this time, and especially in something such as childbirth or regretting childbirth, I don't think would be positively perceived for women at the time. A couple of pages later, we learn that a woman named Justine is being blamed. The way I interpreted this is that one, woman being blamed for a man's wrongdoing, I can imagine was probably very stereotypical at the time. But 2, woman being blamed for the death of a child. Now, especially in the context of the world right now, the reversal of Roe v. Wade in the United States, and how women are often blamed for abortion, for childcare, for anything that goes wrong with children that a father is never blamed for. Here we have a creature that was created by a man murdering someone, and a woman is blamed for this. And then we're going to enter into part 2. I know one of the parts we get Frankenstein's monster's perspective, but I don't remember when it is, and I don't think it's now. So I'm going to continue listening to this. I'm definitely enjoying it far more than I thought I was going to. Actually, that's a lie. I thought I was going to enjoy this a lot more if I read it like outside of an academic perspective, and I definitely am feeling that right now, and I'm glad that that is happening. I was worried that I was just going to not like it. So this has been a long update, so I will let you go and I will continue reading. Hello, so I wanted to give you an update because I got to part 3 of Frankenstein, and that's on page 153. I am loving this so much more than I did the first time I read this, and I think that that is mostly due to the fact I'm in a different stage in my life. And I think that when I first read Frankenstein, I just didn't really understand the postpartum early motherhood implications that the book is talking about, or that Mary Shelley is talking about. Additionally, I think reading it in the context of 2025, where we are losing a lot of rights or established things in our society because of the fact that men do not have empathy. They haven't been taught empathy. Not all men, of course. Not talking about you if you're an empathetic man. Talking about the patriarchy, okay? And they see empathy as feminine and weak. We are seeing that every day and facing the consequences of that. And I think this book, it's also suggesting readers to feel empathetic towards Frankenstein's monster as well, and teaching people that not having empathy, which Frankenstein doesn't have for this monster he created, results in a detrimental consequence. Frankenstein's monster killing the people around him, right? Also tying in these like religious connotations of how God owed Adam. I just feel like this was maybe the perfect time for me to read Frankenstein in order to appreciate it. And the reason I'm saying this is because part 2 is specifically looking at how Frankenstein's monster felt after Frankenstein like basically almost barfed all over him and slammed the door in his face. And the first chapter is Frankenstein calling his monster evil, not even shocked that it would do this for no reason. Like, he doesn't have a reason to believe that Frankenstein's monster, that the monster would do something like this. It's just because this monster looks evil, he's like, well, he must have done something evil. And we do learn that he did kill Frankenstein's brother. Right now, Frankenstein just assumes that this evil, ugly, wretched creature would do something just out of pure evil, which is not the case. He's literally just left what is essentially a baby all alone. So like, of course the baby is going to use its instincts to survive. He meets up with the monster. The monster says like, I expected this reception. All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Not once does he refer to his dad by any bad name. He's referring to how his father speaks of him. He's like, have I not suffered enough? I'm thy creature, and I will even be mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the which thou owest me. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, so Satan, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I am alone, I am irrevocably excluded. Yeah, exactly. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. You have made me wretched beyond expression. You have left me no power to consider whether I am just to you or not. After saying these things, that Frankenstein owes him something as his like creator, he gets into how he learned how to speak English, his journey basically to getting to Geneva, where Frankenstein is from, and he was like literally woken up and he's just a baby. Like, he had sensations attacking him at all times. I saw, felt, heard, and smelt all at the same time, and it was indeed a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. My son is just learning how to do that behind this camera right now. The whole section after that is him experiencing life and its pleasantries. He's talking about the sounds of that birds make, the warm sun on his skin, the moon and how it shines a light in the forest. Like, he's very poetic. He talks about how he learned how to speak the language, this family that he meant. He just wanted to learn. He was literally just a baby. Again, I want to emphasize that because I think that it appeals to me a bit more, because I'm thinking of my son needing me to learn things, and a creature needing to learn things has to rely on others to learn things, would definitely feel this sense of dread and misery that Frankenstein's monster is feeling. He brings up Paradise Lost, which Mary Shelley had used in the epigraph, right? So he says, like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other human being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in any other respect. Exactly. This is just a side tangent, and I don't know if this is going to date this video, but there was a TikTok the other day of this mom being like, I don't really talk to my kid. Like, my wife does that. I realized that I never spoke to my kid. Me and my child do not stop talking to each other, right? He's talking to me right now because he thinks that I'm talking to him, even though I'm talking to the camera. He talks about how he's read Paradise Lost, and we know that Paradise Lost is a poem on the creation myth and the fall of the angels. And so he talks about, like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other human being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in any other aspect. He had come forth from the hands of God, a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature, but I was a wretched, helpless, and alone. Many times I considered Satan as a fitter emblem of my condition, for often like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within. Then he asks Frankenstein if he could make him like a bride of sorts, because he's using Eve as an example. Like, God created Eve for Adam to have a companion and someone that understands the way Adam feels, because obviously Adam isn't an angel, nor is he a god. So he needs something of equivalence to have as a companion. Exactly. Frankenstein just wants the same, and he feels like his creator should give him that. And Frankenstein's like, no fucking way, what the hell, I would never do that. It's very fitting because it's very reflective of the fact that Frankenstein's parents gave him Elizabeth as a companion. So maybe he should think twice about what he's feeling. He says, I'm alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. Frankenstein here is playing kind of two parts. So Frankenstein as a god, creating Eve to Adam, but also as a parent who gave a kid a sibling, such and so, Frankenstein's parents giving Frankenstein Elizabeth. And again, this idea of like giving women, very weird, but definitely a likely commentary at the time of how a woman just is viewed as property to a man in both instances. We're supposed to see Frankenstein empathize with him, feel sympathetic towards him, but he also views women as less than. Very interesting that like Mary Shelley I don't think is making like a substantial point about it, but there's definitely a suggestion here. Both these creatures, evil in mind and evil in look, view a woman as below them or less than, or a companion in a sort. Frankenstein's like, okay, chill, like whatever, I'll do it, jeez. And now we're in part 3. So I'm going to continue reading this and I'll come back to you because this novel has an ending called The Nightmare of Romantic Idealism by Paul Cantor that I don't think I've ever read. So I might come back after I finish Frankenstein and then get into this as well. Yeah, he has a lot to say today. I'm so sorry, guys. Yeah, that's crazy. Anyways, I'll come back to you. Okay, bye. Hello, so I'm coming back to you having just finished Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read the last third and the discussion, The Nightmare of Romantic Idealism by Paul Cantor at the end of the book that's provided by Penguin. I really think, first of all, the essay that's provided at the end of this edition is so interesting and it really dives into what exactly Mary Shelley was discussing with this book, tackling sort of the main themes, the creation of man, nature, and how romantic ideologies of that time were to go back to nature, that humans belong sort of in nature, their most natural selves. It didn't dive into postpartum depression or like being a mother or being a parent really, which I think is a large and unlooked at perspective of Frankenstein that I think goes really unnoticed and not really talked about. Like, yes, okay, when we talk about like the creation myth and discussing Frankenstein as both God and Satan and Frankenstein's monster as both Satan and Adam, we are technically diving into the creation and how a creator versus created go hand in hand and affect one another. But I think for me personally, having just given birth, I had a new perspective on this book, and I would like to read, I think, some feminist texts discussing Frankenstein, specifically on postpartum depression and stuff like that. I think that could be really interesting for me, so I might do that, or watch a video or watch a TikTok. Let's be serious. So the first time I read this book, I actually gave it 2.5 stars, and I wrote that I thought it was interesting and it kept me more engaged than other classics, but I thought that it was okay overall. I think the main fault is my own expectations. I've hyped it so highly in my head as being eerie and creepy when it was neither, and I do sort of stand by that, but I think having read it and knowing that it wasn't the scariest book alive put me into like a better perspective to read this. And now 7 years later, I come to you a new woman, and like I mentioned, I don't know if this is because I've had a child. I can clearly see that commentary on motherhood and postpartum depression, but I just enjoyed this so much more than I did the last time I read it. And I also think that seeing Frankenstein through a more empathetic lens is also really important, discussing how a lot of the problems in this book could have been solved if Frankenstein was more sympathetic or empathetic to his creation, us as the readers understanding and being kind to something that is unknowing to us or different from us. So I think that the world's issues could be solved if we read Frankenstein through the lens of understanding the monster's struggles to be loved and how we should be more empathetic to his plight and not scared. And I think that Frankenstein in pop culture is presented as this like scarier being, and I think the best Frankenstein reimaginings are when we look at Frankenstein through a more empathetic lens. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, definitely the win of the vlog. But let's go over the books. So we started off this vlog with The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, which I gave 3 stars. I really liked the discussion on death and how you need to do more with your life that you enjoy doing and not what you're supposed to do. It also made me way less scared of Russian classics, which is really good because I have both Anna Karenina and War and Peace on my TBR, and I do really want to get to those this year. So for the purpose of this this vlog, it made me feel a lot better about reading them, that they are more easily digestible, which I really appreciated. Then I read, as you know, the Communist Manifesto. I took a lot out of this. I was really enjoying it. And I do think it's heavily needed to read, kind of, now with the discussion surrounding AI, the workforce, and the new proletariat. I left this unrated, obviously, because I feel like rating this would imply any feelings towards the philosophy of communism rather than the Communist Manifesto itself. So I'm leaving this unrated, but I did really enjoy it. And then the winner of the vlog, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I absolutely adored. I have some slight issues with the letter portions of the novel where Frankenstein is interacting with this other character. I don't really find them necessary, but like I mentioned, love this overall. I think I see it with a new perspective, so it made it a much more interesting read for me. And that's it. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Let me know. And if you would like to follow me on any of my other social medias, I do leave a link down below to my Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram if you would like to follow me there. Of course, they are all currently owned by billionaires that I hate, so they may not be there in the future, but if they're there, when you check, you can give me a follow. And because it is the end of the video, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It does wonders for my channel, makes me feel really good. And that's it. I never know how to end these things, so I will see you next time. Okay, bye!